Fantastic. So thank you so much for having me. My name is Lubomila and I'm the CEO and co-founder of PlanA. I'm going to talk about PlanA in a bit, but first maybe kicking off of actually what is data? Today we live in a society that is driven by technology, driven by a lot of movement of information that flows from our computers in our offices to servers worldwide to then inform another party of what's happening. And it's really fascinating to think of how we've been impacted by technology in the last decade and even more. But it's even more fascinating to see where we're headed. This was a fantastic analysis that was done by by Statista on digital economy compass from 2 years ago, and it essentially looks into the existing tools that we have and how do we use them and utilize them, and what is the predicted amount of dependencies that we're going to have on data. As you can see, we're now kind of gradually on the growth journey, only utilizing 47 zettabytes for 2020 and for the next years to come. But this is going to go into the phenomenal number of 2,142 zettabytes, which is kind of unthinkable. I'm sure many of you have seen this graph saying like this is what is being created worldwide in a minute using YouTube, using all of the other social media platforms that we use. Put this into perspective and imagine what this really means when it gets to 2035. When it comes to the use of this data, okay, we found out that it's quite a lot. I think it's really important that we think about the different types in which you can use data. We have geographical data, and this is essentially how we use our geolocation on the phone. We have maps. We have so many different types of ways in which geographical data is useful. And this is also accompanied by cultural data. This is all these records of history that we have, all these like copies of books. And I'm sure many of you know about the project that Google had to basically scan a lot of books that were maybe not in the right condition and might have been lost if they were not to be scanned. We have scientific data. This is actually the basis of all the data that we use on day-to-day basis, and kind of all of the foundational choices that are being made by the scientists that define how we develop and implement solutions. And that's kind of heavily where also we will look as well. Financial data is probably the one that is most exhaustive and most overwhelmingly visible in our existence. We have, of course, statistical data, meteorological data, natural data, and then transport. I'm sure all of you intuitively can think of many solutions that are offering all of these types of data. But if I ask you today about all of these data points, you probably are going to be able to immediately think of how transportation data, geographical data, cultural data, finance, statistical, meteorological fits into your day-to-day. But do you actually think about scientific and natural data as something that is part of your decision-making today? The truth is that from all of the data sources that then you see here, all these data types, the natural and scientific data are the ones that are most ignored, and in terms of how we make decisions. And if I have to give a maybe weird metaphor, we're talking about the kind of in the same way that we have our atmosphere that is covering our planet, we are kind of ignoring the existence of this super important element of all the data that we have gathered. And there's many reasons for that. There's many reasons for this. And today I would like to explore actually how data is being used in other circumstances and why it should be used also in nature, and why these two worlds need to merge and need to marry in one way or another. This is an exciting app that launched like a year, 2 years ago in Germany that actually consolidates all the different types of and means of transport that you might have as a kind of user, citizen. And it includes the public transport plus some services for booking cars. You can also book like e-scooters. And the whole idea there was that they wanted to combine in one place all of these data sources to allow essentially for the data to be kind of widely available whenever you make a decision about how you're going to move from one place to another. I'm sure many of you also use Spotify. Spotify is a data company. Yes, they do offer a music platform where you can listen to a lot of music. But if you think about all these algorithms that create the playlists, if you think about all the algorithms that suggest to you the best option for a little, party or like what you want to be doing, all of these different kind of, when you click like radio and so on, this is actually based on data, and they have algorithms that are able to analyze the data that is coming from music, that is able to understand the type of music that is being used, and then translate this into actually something a lot more tangible and kind of an experience that is related to your own preferences. I'm sure many of you have also heard of Salesforce. Salesforce is kind of it's actually a platform. It's not a software provider itself. They have a kind of a plug and play model where they give different parts of their technology to their clients to enable different decisions to be made by accessing and plugging yourself into like the different systems that Salesforce also connects to, and then be able to predict what the future of your business looks like. So this is the future of how you use money, the future of how you hire people, how aggressive you become at sales, because maybe sales is doing really well today, and so on. Where is the data on nature? Of course, I haven't exhausted all the options that are out there related to data on nature and science, but I'm giving some tangible examples of things that we use on the day-to-day. And in that sense, it feels kind of a bit questioning, concerning that there is not necessarily enough information about nature itself, or it's not necessarily coming out of the immediate solutions that we use on day to day. And I would love to ask you, to put in the chat and also for the Q&A itself, to tell me different softwares that you use today that actually incorporate this environmental layer into your decision making. Everything we do has impact on the planet. And there's a lot of data about this. There's a lot of data that shows actually how much we've depleted the natural resources that we have. There's a lot of data that shows how we're really not good at using our resources efficiently. There's data also on how much CO2 is created by basically doing all these e-commerce choices and ordering a product from China that needs to come, travel to you, and then be delivered in front of your door in London. And this yet is not part of the decision making of big businesses. As big businesses make decisions, they are quite often defining it based on financial KPIs and other KPIs related to the amount of resources that they have in terms of people, in terms of money, in terms of time. And what is really challenging when it comes to actually this particular topic, and maybe ignoring this data layer that is super crucial, is that we're missing value. And we're skipping to understand actually what kind of value could be created and or is lost by the fact that we don't understand the environmental kind of elements of our existence. So I want to give a few examples of how data about our natural life is used at the moment, and maybe encourage some food for thought on why we need to marry these two different sides of data types. This is a really beautiful graph that shows essentially kind of the unfortunate reality of how much wildlife we have lost worldwide over the course of the last few decades. This is a result of a study that World Wildlife Fund did, so WWF did some in 2016. They released the updated version of this, and this is a visual from 2010 that essentially shows like which species are being threatened. How does this matter to a business? Well, Actually, if you are working in agriculture, you're really dependent on the ecosystem that you exist in. And if the ecosystem is decaying and a lot of species are going extinct or reducing in numbers, most likely the natural ecosystem that you want to benefit from is not going to be as fertile as you want it to be. When it comes to other elements of environmental information and science, and why this kind of can help businesses, is if you think about the extinction of these species, what it leads to is also actually the increased speed of the development of climate change. And with the increased speed of climate change kind of becoming a visible part of our lives, we're also seeing a lot of natural disasters increasing in speed and also in frequency. And if you translate this into a business sense, this means essentially lost money, capex that is not accounted for, capital expenditure, meaning capex, that at the moment is not part of our accounting system. And essentially, at the moment, if a factory in the middle of Thailand is hit by a flood, the money that have to be invested in order to compensate for this particular disaster and for all the repercussions of the lost infrastructure are dependent on actually the information that maybe could have been and should have been analyzed. This is another fantastic tool that, again, WWF is involved in, but it's also done by a few institutes. Just a screenshot I made from the platform itself is the water risk filter. And this is a platform that assesses and kind of values and then hopefully leads to some sort of a response by giving an idea of like, now the status quo, now it's time to take an action, to show where at the moment there is desertification happening worldwide that is essentially leading to a lot of unfortunate kind of realities where species go extinct. The ecosystem is also decaying in terms of flora and fauna, both going extinct. And of course, the community itself is led to a lot of challenges because they have, of course, quite of a, I would say, different reality that they need to face where this resource is not existent. As you can imagine, if you use this kind of data in a business circumstance, you can understand that probably there's opportunity for you to put your water filtering systems in these kinds of geographies. So working in the government on that particular topic. There's multiple businesses that we have in the Green Tech Alliance that I'm going to mention in a bit that are working on that. But this data for the large water companies is actually not something that, or the large companies that are working on that, is not necessarily part of their big decision making. And then final one, which is related to reforestation and forestry. There's, for many of you might be a familiar kind of resource of knowledge, there's ETH Zurich. This is an institute in Switzerland that has a lab there called Crowder Lab that focuses on educating people, scientists, as well as businesses on appropriate reforestation. They came out with a study that quite quickly exploded, I would say, in 2019, so like short amount of time ago, which was explaining that by planting 800 billion trees, we're going to be able to reduce by 50% the CO2 emissions that are emitted on the planet at the moment. The study got, if I don't want to get into the whole like excitement there, but the study got not only a lot of media, it exploded in terms of that, but it also got a lot of criticism because it was essentially saying, oh, now we fixed the problem, so we need to continue polluting. Of course, they didn't intend to do that because what they care about is the planet. But this project was really impactful because it essentially was explaining how many of these reforestation efforts that we have at the moment, with all the offsetting projects, with all these like buy one tree for €1 kind of setups, it's not always the best thing that our planet needs. And you haven't solved the problem by implementing or planting a tree. And what they explained was the different types of soils and what kind of trees they need in order to be essentially good. And this is an example again of a business opportunity and also like business information and decision-making improvement to be introduced by using the system, because you then can actually make your efforts for the planet more impactful. You can make your effort as a reforester more impactful and really work with the ecosystem of our planet. Yet this again is not part of how we make decisions, so that's essentially an opportunity for as we say, food for thought. So with this in mind, I want to move into what we do. I am here not necessarily to speak about planning in a promotional way, but more to give an opportunity to see one angle where these two concepts of data and any kind of financial data can be married with data about science and nature, and improve our business decision making, and also improve the way we think about the future as corporates, as businesses. And hopefully it's going to encourage all of you to think about this as well, regardless of the positions that you have and regardless of the topics that you cover on day to day. So what we have developed is software that enables businesses to calculate, monitor, reduce, and report on their emissions. We also have an algorithm, and all of this is based on data. We use data to enable businesses to make better decisions, to eliminate emissions, and also to be clearer on their stance of how they become a sustainable company. We don't like greenwashing. We use data and science at the core of everything that we do, which means that we need to be really focused on what is most impactful for the business, but also for the planet as well. So we have two products. One is an algorithm that predicts where and how climate change will hit the hardest. We also have a software that enables businesses to calculate, monitor, reduce, report on their emissions and improve their ESG performance. The algorithm itself is actually really exciting piece of work that enables businesses to analyze climate risk. It encapsulates a lot of data, 8 indices, spatial data, also governmental data sets, as well as organizational data sets, to then look into all these different perspectives related to oceans, forests, wildlife, sustainable living, sustainable energy, waste management, and embody them into one single source of truth that is based on a lot of people's work, that gives an indication of how supply chains are going to be impacted, and also how your access to natural resources is going to be impacted, and what are the worst hit by climate change parts of the world, so that you end up making an informed decision where you want to operate and who you want to support with your efforts. We also have a software that enables businesses to calculate, monitor, reduce, report on their emissions, as well as improve their ESG performance. For this software, we integrate with the existing data systems within a company, financial data systems such as accounting, ERP systems, any kind of databases, to then enable the company to translate all of these data points into emissions and give them an indication of how they're performing at the moment and how they can improve. We give benchmarks for the industry, we give an idea of how they can reduce, and we also enable them to really see this as part of their decision making. The product itself is built in a modular kind of way. So you have a foundational piece of the platform, and then we have custom modules that we add according to the different clients that we work with. For those of you that are not familiar with kind of the carbon accounting analysis, there's 3 scopes of analysis, and then you analyze your emissions that come from your facilities, your vehicles, which is scope 1, your different services that you use, such as electricity, heating, cooling, and based off of that, then you move on to kind of having, the scope 3, which is the most complex one, and this is your suppliers. For an automotive company, this is 98% of their emissions. So what we do is we analyze all of this, we put it in one single product, and we do it for different industries by adding these different modules that are applicable to the particular industries. We also support with ESG reporting, because this is really deeply so already integrated in the way a company presents itself, or also in financial analysis. So that's kind of our way of bridging also the discussion. And behind all of this is, of course, a lot of data. Data about anything related to the company itself, its existence. So this is the internal data, so scope 1, 2, and 3, as I explained. We have also a lot of external data that is related to kind of making these benchmarks visible, clear, translating money into CO2 emissions, and also translating any data point into emissions. And all of this leads to the product that we spoke about. This is one example. There's many more, and I encourage all of you to look into an organization that I set up last year together with 5 other co-founders called Green Tech Alliance. I'll put it in the chat. Greentech.Earth is the domain where we have more than 600 solutions that combine data sources and analyze data to support our planet to become more sustainable, or excuse me, the community on this planet to become more sustainable and the planet to be more healthy. So, and this leads to the final question that I might have is like, after all of these things that I mentioned, do you think you're using your data well? I think our planet needs a lot of support at the moment. And, you know, calculating your emission is the bare minimum you can do to kick off your journey. As an individual, you can do it with many fantastic companies, and I'm happy to give examples in the Q&A. As a business, you can do it, of course, with PlanA, but there's also other options. And yet, I think it's really important for you to think about this, because if we go back to this, all of these different elements have to be connected, and at the moment they aren't. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the questions.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Lubomila. That was really insightful, and I loved hearing you discuss all of those areas. I've certainly got a couple of questions that I'd like to kick things off, and I can see we've already had 1 or 2 starting to come in from at home as well. So I guess my first question, just to kick things off, is can you tell us any more about some examples of where you've worked with large organizations, with large companies?
Yeah, absolutely. So we work with quite a lot of different industries, and I would say probably the financial one is the most prominent. But we also work with automotive. We also work with construction companies, quite a lot of the biggest polluters, like not obviously oil companies. We, for value reasons, have decided not to work with them. But for those that are like definitely heavy polluting, like fashion companies and so on, we always just make sure that they're not doing this just to offset and then be able to claim fame and sustainability levels that they don't have. So an example would be Gani. Gani is a fashion company based in Sweden. They work with brands like Levi's and like other large, but they're huge company. They are visible in every single city in Europe and also in the US. And for them, we basically have mapped out their whole scope 1, 2, and 3 and translated this into a calculator that is added to the platform. And the scope 3 incorporates data from their suppliers. It incorporates data from their financial results. And it also enables employees to be engaged with this topic, because the platform itself enables a multitude of users to use it. And also it has different elements. So like the calculating element, the analysis element, and the reduction, which is an action plan that could be distributed amongst multiple people to accomplish. And then you have the reporting, which is according to certain standards like CDP, GRI, and then PCAP for financial institutions. That's one example. I can give BMW Foundation as another example. We also have like banks like Societe Generale. And for all of these companies, the common denominator is that they're a bit like overwhelmed with all the new regulations, which came through the Green Deal, and also the, I would say, quite radical choices that have been made in the UK as well, like with quite heavy, punishments also for inaction. And for them, it's really important to make it right. So that's why they're opening up their systems to enable the data to be used for in the best manner for this particular topic.
Fantastic. Sounds amazing, definitely. I'm going to jump over to the Q&A. We've had a couple of questions in, one from David, one from Andrew. First question there from David is, can PlanA be used to monitor council climate emergency programs? So I guess he's talking about within the UK, different councils have different action plans. Can PlanA help with that?
So we're at the moment working on our first, probably it's a pilot project on a more governmental level in engagement, and that's with cities. Mm-hmm. And for cities, kind of the ball game is a bit different, because they have a carbon budget that is also defined by the Paris agreements, as well as companies and industries, but it's not as granular as it is for, I would say, constituencies and so on. And it's something that we're always open to test. We haven't done it yet on a kind of a constituency council level. We have done it on a city level and also on a, we shall see now. Maybe there's even on a larger scale, but it's not confirmed. It could be like a municipality level, but that's not confirmed yet, so can't speak in further detail.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll jump on to the question from Andrew. It says, hi Lubomila. What impact do you hope that the recent Gupta review on the economics of biodiversity will have on policy making? Thanks, Andrew.
Really fantastic question. So if I can speak on a more personal level to start with, I've always been really disappointed when I look into even how scientific and natural data is used. Because, you know, in the way I presented my case with the presentation, the logic there is that science and nature are kind of divided from everything else. But I would say that even within this small group, nature and science, there's already discrimination against biodiversity data. And that is because it's not as easy to put something in the currency of carbon. And carbon is unfortunately still kind of the most tangible thing that we know. This is why trees are being planted everywhere, because, you know, you see it as the you know, as an effective tool, and you can quantify it quite easily. The reality is totally different, and this question is actually demonstrating this. We can rely now, and we know it actually from insiders with regards to the European Commission and also a few other institutes that are pushing on a more global level kind of this decision, is that there would be more stringent policies on incorporating even biodiversity in the way you calculate your impact. So even if you're a company that is not producing within your scope 3, there's something that you are looking into. And the first stage of this policy is going to be about those that have immediate impact on the planet that is related to biodiversity. And these are those that deforest, like, you know, any paper company, any cement, any mining company. Many of these industries that are not, I would say, so much in the prime and in the news are going to be impacted. And in Germany, there's even already carbon taxation that looks into incorporating different KPIs that go beyond carbon itself.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. I'm a little bit conscious of time on this one, so there's a couple more questions still come in. I'm going to leave them there actually, just until the end, and if we have time at the end, we'll come back to it. And if not, we'll grab the questions and do our best to follow up with afterwards. So I'm just going to say thank you very much for now, Lubomila. That was fantastic. And as I say, hopefully we'll get a couple of minutes at the end just to fire through a few more of these. But thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Isabel, if I could ask you please to turn on your camera and your microphone, we'll introduce you. So everybody, this is Dr. Isabel van der Keere. She's the founder and CEO at Immersive Rehab, and she's going to be talking today about how they're using VR to transform and improve neurorehabilitation. So welcome along. It's good to see you, Isabel.
Thanks, Dave. I'll just share my screen. Yeah.
You're a professional already. That's what I like. Straight in. No messing. No messing.
Hi, everyone. By the way, thanks for listening.
We've practiced this a lot, didn't we?
Yeah.
That is looking fantastic.
Looking
so
great.
I'll get out of the way. Have a good session, and I'll come back at the end for the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Dave. So thanks for coming and listening to the talk. So I'm, as Dave said, I'm the founder and CEO of Immersive Rehab, and we focus on really improving neurorehabilitation programs and offering digital therapeutics by using virtual reality to do that. And it's really about improving patient engagement. It's if you've ever been through rehab, whether it was minor or severe rehab, it is a very challenging thing to go through because it's often not motivational. It's very repetitive. You don't see the point of doing it. You don't get any feedback from doing it. And obviously the people that we work with in particular are people that have been affected by neurological conditions, whether they had a stroke or they have MS, for example. and they often have limited motor skills, and that's really where the issues lie in terms of their gains that they have with the current rehabilitation programs. And also understanding, so this is for them from a patient perspective in helping them improve their rehab, but then from a clinician perspective, it's very hard for them often to assess their patients because they lack enough data and also enough continuous follow-up of patients and to understand fully how they progress, and then at the same time then they need that assessment to then change, for example, drug treatments or change their treatments down the line as well. So so that's really what our focus is on at Immersive Rehab. And the reason why I started the company myself is I had a severe work accident 10 years ago, and I was so I had a head injury, neck injury, and severe balance issues because of the accident. I'm a biomedical engineer by background myself. And so I went through the whole rehab period, rehabilitation period myself, and all the frustrations essentially that came with it. Isolation, motivation lacking, not really fully grasping how I was progressing day to day, because I didn't get any feedback really, aside from having gone through the sessions. And so that's really how Immersive Rehab came to be, in really having a focus on how can we change the engagement in particular for people, but also how can we improve access to rehab, both in a clinic and in a home setting then as well. And if you look at the current situation around the world, it is a very big problem in terms of a lot of people are suffering from neurological conditions, stroke being the biggest one in that category. There's about 70 million stroke victims, first stroke victims every year worldwide, and the number is only growing, which is due to various reasons. But the most important thing is that more than 50% of those stroke survivors have a remaining disability. And that is obviously impacting people's daily lives. They can't work anymore, they can't dress themselves, they can't even cook for themselves. And that then obviously from a physical disability, you end up with a mental health disability and all other comorbidities that come with it, cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, etc., because people are not mobile enough, so they just are stuck in their homes and they're not able to move. And so we focus on two groups of neurological conditions, which is the acute neurological conditions like stroke, spinal injury, and then you have the other neurological conditions, which are neurodegenerative conditions like MS, multiple sclerosis, and ALS, or motor neuron disease. And if you look at MS, for example, the very shocking part there is as well that it's a very young population. The average age is about 30 years old, of which 3 to 1 women to men. So there's a lot more women affected as well. And these are people in the prime of their life. They are working professionally. They're dependent on themselves. They might be caring for others, whether they're kids or elderly people. So it is a very hard diagnosis to get. And then obviously if the care that you get is not offering the progress that you're looking for, it is very problematic, not only for your physical progress, but also for your, just mental health as well. So, I mean, and these issues all existed already before COVID. COVID has only increased the issues that are around offering care, because due to COVID, a lot of the neurorehabilitation clinics had to close down because all the focus was and still is in some regions on COVID and COVID care. So that has obviously impacted the access to neurorehabilitation services, aside from the very acute cases in a clinic in very small groups. That is still there, but all the other services that also exist in outpatient services have been scaled back very drastically to maybe the odd phone call or Skype session. So that's been a really problem as well going forward. And I mean, the focus, what is rehab essentially? So when you go through rehab, or when you have a neurological condition, for example, it is often linked to brain damage. So when you have a stroke, your part of your brain is damaged, and that affects either your mobility or your cognition or both. But essentially, if your mobility is affected, there's nothing wrong with your arm, but it's because the connection between your brain and your arm has been damaged. And so you then go through rehab to actually then hopefully restore that connection between your brain and your motor skills to regain that mobility that you have. But if you're obviously, and there, that's where obviously doing very consistent rehabilitation programs in a very rigorous manner, and that also should be effective, could give you more mobility back. But if you don't have that effective and also motivating program to go through, and people are just frustrated, they don't do the exercise, they don't do the number of movement that they should be doing to retrain that, people will leave the hospital after the 6 to 8 weeks that they would be in rehab with very limited mobility gains. And then this is in particular an issue for upper limb mobility gains, and that's really where we focus on, and on fine motor skills as well. So just to give you an idea of how current neurorehabilitation is being approached, this is very basic, it's very, which in the end, it's as long as the tools would work, that would not be the issue. But the problem is because they're so basic, they don't give you any feedback from how you're progressing. They don't track your movement. They don't, they're not personalized as well. It makes patients incredibly frustrating to use these type of tools. It is also very childlike, these type of tools. So people often, and therapists as well, they often don't use them because they know that people get so frustrated by using them. So they would just ask people to just do certain movements, even not interacting with any objects as well, just to hope that they have some motivation to then progress. And that's really where we come in, and we can recreate environments in a full 3D environment, where we can actually allow people to directly engage with larger objects. The objects are virtual, so you have to imagine it, if you've never tried virtual reality, as you could just, if you're in front of your computer, this would be a virtual computer. The table that your computer is on is a virtual table. There might be like a phone, which would be a virtual phone, etc. But so because of the lack of mobility and fine motor skills and strength that often patients have, they're not able often to manipulate larger objects. But using our virtual objects, they actually are able to directly manipulate larger objects. And because it's such an immersive environment, it's like you're walking into this new world. Your brain is actually picking up and thinking, oh, these are real movements that I'm doing. I'm interacting with real objects, and that is helping then this visual stimulation as well to then obviously recreate those connections between your brain and your motor skills. And also the fact we can make it incredibly engaging. We can create environments that are actually motivating. We can create challenges within the environments. We can, we try obviously to avoid the repetitions, but we mix all the movements that they should be doing in the challenges that we're offering patients. And then obviously we can track movements of patients. So we can track their mobility. We can track also their concentration span to see, for example, eye tracking is something that we're looking into the future, but that's also something that we could track, especially to see where they are focusing on in the environment, for example, to then help personalize the environments better to the patients. And then obviously the data collection about the movements are incredibly then important to give the assessments back to the clinicians and also to the patients themselves, so they can actually understand how they are progressing as well. So I mean, this is our kind of long-term vision and vision for the company, and it's really now immersive rehab is it's still very limited in terms of the reach because it's such a new technology, but and the data exchange even in a hospital is very basic. It would be very paper-based. It's very scale-based as well, which often doesn't make sense if you, as one therapist, are assessing a patient and then you have to give your patient to another therapist or clinician. What does the scale really mean for that one physio or clinician compared to another clinician or therapist? So that often is also posing problems in terms of the assessments of the patients as well. So when we can come in very early stage, when a stroke patient comes in, actually from the very early stage, as soon as they are able to start their rehab, we can bring our solution within any hospital room. It doesn't have to be a specialized rehab clinic as well, which means as well, even if they're stuck in their bed still, they have something to do. And that's often why clinicians and therapists reach out to us as well, because if they don't have anything to give them, patients lose their motivation. And obviously, then when people then are transferred, for example, in a more specialized rehab setting, they don't have the motivation anymore. They don't see the point anymore because they've already been stuck in bed and not doing anything, that they can actually see that they have an option to improve as well. And then obviously, once people then leave the hospital, we want to bring it into people's homes as well, or community settings, so they can actually keep doing their rehab in a home setting, but send the data back to the clinician and to the therapist so they can follow up and understand how patients are doing from in a remote way, and but also tune in live, for example. So if a therapist and clinician can tune in live when they need to, they can actually follow a patient how they're doing. And this is in particular, this is important for all neurological conditions, but this is in particular important for example, neurodegenerative conditions like MS patients, because they're, with stroke, it happens and it's very severe from the beginning. With MS, you're diagnosed, but it gets worse over time. So more patients with MS, they're actually directly in a home or community setting already as well. So, so yeah, and data collection and data transmission obviously is a very important thing in terms of making immersive rehab also part of standard care, to make sure that if you're able to assess patients in a rigorous manner, then obviously it will be a solution that is trusted as well. So so clinicians can rely on, also insurance companies can rely on it, etc. In terms of certain claims that clinicians would be making to change drug treatments, for example, for their patients. In particular, again, I'm thinking of MS patients in that particular case. So this is just a screenshot of one of our experiences where you actually are manipulating large objects. You have a challenge to, so this is based on rotational movements, reaching and grabbing. And the aim is to reach a certain height. We can have different like different settings in terms of difficulty as well within the environment. There's an aspect of cognition that is part of it as well. As most patients we work with, they have cognitive issues in some way or the other. So yeah, so and then obviously, yeah, so as I said, the fact that the telehealth arm as well will be something that will be growing further down the line. But this is only going to, just in general in healthcare, telemedicine and remote healthcare is going to become a very important aspect in everyone's life. It has already shown with COVID now, where telemedicine has been around for quite some time, but the issue with telemedicine has always been data reliability and connectivity as well, and data transmission reliability, and how to capture that data in a good way so that the other person, clinician, healthcare professional, can actually deal with this data in a very in a real-time manner, for example, but also that the assessments are actually trustworthy and that they can have confidence in what they're collecting as well. Obviously, with 5G coming, this will only get better because the way the data will be collected and transmitted will be more reliable as well. It will be much faster. There won't be any latency or less latency issues that you would have over a 4G network, for example. And then, yeah, just obviously during COVID time, sadly, there was no other option. The only way you could see your doctor in a lot of cases was through a Skype call, was through, and that's kind of the initial boost of adoption, I guess, that now people were forced to use it because there was no other option. And obviously the value has shown. There's definitely issues around data poverty as well, because even like in regions in Western Europe, there are still regions in Western Europe that have very low bandwidth and very low connectivity. So that obviously means that there are still issues around implementing data telemedicine solutions within these regions. So that's obviously where governments and policymakers and telecom companies need to come together with healthcare professionals and then healthcare companies as well to make sure that patients are offered the best possible care that they need. And that's really our goal as well. It's purely improving patient outcomes to ensure that that they can improve their situation that they are in. So personalization is a very important aspect there as well, because when we're collecting data of a patient, so when you would have two patients, they have a stroke, they are a similar age, still their conditions are different because they're two different people. So they will progress through their rehab differently. So if we offer from day one the same program to these people, one person progresses quicker than the other. It would make sense that they still follow the same program. So by collecting data and by making these programs more personalized to the individual, obviously this will help their recovery as well, where now it's often a one package for all patients. And that's really not because the therapists don't want to personalize it, because they don't have the time to do that. They don't have the tools to do that. They don't have the resources to do that as well. So that's really where we can help as well, to really make it much more personal to the patients themselves. Yeah, so yeah, I'll skip this. So we're still doing clinical validation across, mainly focusing on Europe, the US, and Canada for the moment. Where, yeah, we've had amazing progress in terms of seeing how patients are just engaging with it already as well. And then in terms of concentration spans that go up with people that have severe traumatic brain injury following a complex spine injury, as well, due to an accident. Just by going into our experiences, they're actually much more engaged than they are normally. Also in terms of mobility reach, if you've ever had an injury, again, no matter how small the injury was, often you're very prone to protecting that arm or your leg, or that you're not overstretching. And the same is with, obviously, if you have a stroke, it is an incredibly hard situation to go through. And suddenly also it's a very instant situation where you would lose your mobility in a lot of cases. And so when you're then going through rehab, obviously you are protecting yourself when doing certain movements, etc. And I had that similar situation when I was going through my own rehab as well. But when you give people a challenge and they don't focus on the repetitiveness of the movements, but you actually give people a challenge, they don't think too much about that limitation anymore. And people reach much further and they're much more comfortable than they would be doing in a regular setting. And that was very fascinating to see, not only for the patient, but also for the therapists, to see actually what they could do in a very safe manner when they are given a certain experience where they're actually challenged and motivated, and not focused on their limitations in that manner. So yeah, we've done phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trials, and we're now preparing phase 3 clinical trials as well, which, yeah, we'll be sharing more about in the near future. I thought I would add this because we are a digital therapy. So we are essentially a medical treatment. So we're not a game, we're not a virtual reality game. We are an actual digital treatment. That means that we need to do clinical trials. We need to prove patient outcomes. We need to prove that our system is as good as the current situation in healthcare. And so we need to go through regulatory approvals to ensure that actually our solution can be used in a clinical setting or with patients that have injuries. Very similar to when you would put a new drug out in the markets. Obviously not as rigorous as a drug, but equally same procedures before you would actually be able to give it in the hands of clinicians and patients. So yeah, thanks for listening. Yeah, please follow us, and I look forward to the questions.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Isabel. That was really enjoyable as well, and it's one of those talks, again, it sparks off more and more ideas as we're going through, which is nice. So I will jump straight into a couple of questions. The first question that's come in is from Hamad. He's asking, is your platform, are your tools currently available in the UK? Is it on the NHS or otherwise? Is it accessible at the moment?
So no, we work with a small number of hospitals still at the moment. So we have a focused approach in the hospitals that we work with for the moment. So we worked with some hospitals in the UK, and then we worked with some hospitals in Canada, Germany, and the US. Once we finalize, especially our phase 3 clinical trials, then obviously we will be a lot more widely available. But now we focus on a smaller number of hospitals to ensure that we have all the necessary information and data that we need to fully launch it in a wider scale as well. So.
Fantastic. And you did touch on it briefly in your presentation, but in terms of the value of this digital approach compared to normal current practices, how does that compare for neurorehabilitation?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it is the cost of like keeping a stroke patient, for example, in a bed one day longer is very expensive for a hospital. So if you can actually reduce discharge or improve the discharge of patients with one day, it is already a massive cost for a hospital, a massive cost savings for a hospital. Also, so our tool itself is not the massive cost for a hospital if we can actually show that we can improve this in terms of, so we're doing health economic studies as well, especially the longer ones now within the phase 3 trials, which will give even more results. We have initial results about how we can improve this health economic situation for hospitals in terms of reducing bed stay and time in hospital for these patients, also reducing readmissions, because a lot of what the issues are today is because, for example, if you're a stroke patient, you go into the hospital, you would go through rehab for about, depends on the country you're in, between 4 to 8 weeks. But then you're discharged. But again, if you're going through a rehab situation where the rehab is not effective, then you leave the hospital. And there's again long waiting times for you to access new rehab, and the chance of other conditions occurring, other comorbidities, the chance of you having a second stroke because you're not moving, you're immobile, but also the fact that you're looking for new rehabilitation, is that the chance that you're getting readmitted in some way is quite high. Wow. And these readmissions are very costly again for hospitals as well. And then all the other, again, costs that come with comorbidities like cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, mental health issues that come with it are significant.
You can see it stacks up quite quickly for sure.
Yeah.
And I guess that kind of answers a question from Alison, but I will just ask it just in case we've missed anything else there. But Alison's asking, how does the cost of VR rehabilitation compare to traditional costs?
Yeah. I mean, so again, the cost of rehabilitation, traditional costs, you have to see it really as a whole package, in the sense where you have the costs of the hospital, the healthcare professionals, the cost of the admission, essentially the time of keeping people in a bed occupied, where they can't offer a bed to other patients, for example, which is increasing costs in other areas of the hospital. Then you have the readmission costs that come on top of that as well. Yes, so it is a big package, and in our case, essentially, what we can offer is we offer so we still have obviously the healthcare professionals in a clinical setting; they will always be there. But if we are offering a software package to the hospital, and if we then can actually reduce this bed stay in a hospital, have quicker release, also reduce readmissions, that's really where we're saving costs for hospitals as well.
Fantastic. And I just had a couple of questions regarding the data, I guess, just to kind of wrap things up from that side of things. Obviously, you collect movement data. How is that specifically used to benefit the patients and the clinicians?
Yeah. So essentially, the movement data is tracked. For example, when a patient is in the environment, and you saw one of our experiences where it's like rotation movement, reaching and grabbing. And so by understanding how far a patient is moving from one exercise to the next, or from one day to the next, you can actually understand how they are progressing in their mobility. And by understanding this already, this is a first indication of how patient is progressing to the clinician. Then obviously they see how they're progressing. The other aspect is as well that this movement data we can feed back within our solutions. So if, for example, a patient is progressing quite well, we can actually adapt the programs. So then the system would actually learn from the patient and adapt to the patient how they're progressing further down the line. So that's really where machine learning would come in a further stage, where then the system really learns from the patient and creates this, I guess, twin of this patient within our system, where they then this digital twin would develop with the patient going forwards, essentially. So.
Yeah, the personalisation side of things makes so much sense. I guess just one final question then, and I'm not sure if it's something that you'd want to do or not, or whether it's ethical even, but maybe it's just my personality. Is there any scope to like gamify the rehab a little bit? Because I use certain software now, and for instance, I'm practicing chess, and every
Yeah,
day
yeah.
there's a little reward for me to do a little bit of practice every day. Is that something that could be built into your platform?
Yeah, I mean, we use, so I said before, we're not a game, but we use gamification, absolutely. And the gamification comes, so the same principles are in terms of challenges that we give within our environments, which are very similar to challenges you would have, for example, in a regular game. There's incentives that you could give to patients to keep people engaged, and that's something very similar that is being used in regular gaming as well. So from that perspective, yeah, absolutely. So we use the gamification approaches, but it is very much focused on treatments, and so it would more come from how can we keep people engaged from one stage to the next. So that's where the gamification, I guess, comes in. Yeah.
Perfect. On that, I am going to start to wrap things up a bit. Actually, I'm a little bit conscious of time, and we do try to keep these lunchtime sessions to that 1 to 2 o'clock. So there was a few questions that we didn't get to.
Sure.
We will grab those, and we will follow up directly for people at home to be able to get the answers that they're after. A few people as well. I always do just double check if people do want to reach out to you on Twitter or LinkedIn directly. You're both quite happy for that to happen, eh?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, in that case, thank you very much, Isabel. Thank you very much, Lubomila. It was fantastic learning more about your businesses, all the cool things that you're doing, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And maybe we can even get you back to a live event or something like that at some point in the future. So thank you both very much.
Very good.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.